Well, well, well. Looks like we're coming back out of the woodwork with my mediocre editing skills to bring you guys another Q&A. It's been 4 whole months since our last video, and it's probably going to be even longer until our next one. Now, I don't know if that's exactly true, but that's not what today is going to be about. Today, we are doing another Q&A, where you write the comments and questions, and I give the responses and some half-baked answers. Now, first, let's talk some hate mail. Now, as far as the hate mail segment's going to go, what I'm going to do is read some of my absolute favorite negative comments on some of Juju's videos that have been in relation to my stories. So, without further ado, let's get to the first one. Now, this first comment is from The Realm Part 2, and it just says, "Disappointed." Bro, you sound like my dad. This next one is kind of an older comment, and it's from the finale of the original Caden Verse Volume 1, and it says, "This story is so stupid, I can't handle it even for sleeping." Nice. This next hate comment is from my favorite hater. His name is The Rude Islander. It says, "Juju, you know I love ya, but Caden is a really terrible author. Everything he writes sounds like it was done by a 6th grade child." Hey. I might be the size of a 6th grader, but I am definitely not one. Also, Rude Islander, it seems your comment was unpopular. This next hate comment was from the poll that Juju did recently, where we kind of announced that we were going to put all of Volume 1 of the Ouroboros Anthology together, and it says, "LOL, I knew I'd be on the losing side of that one." And it's from, guess who? Rude Islander. Yes, Rude Islander. How does it feel to lose to a 6th grader, Rude Islander? This one's not exactly a hate comment. It's a kind of more of a request. It was in response to the poll that Rude Islander commented on. It says, "Please do. The series is starting to be like Key and Peele. There's always a Caden verse story you haven't heard yet, and whenever I find one, I don't know where the fuck it goes in the timeline." And yeah, no, I agree with that. I do have a weird habit of writing things slightly out of order sometimes, which is why Juju and I made the playlists. Those playlists have all these stories in order, and I keep telling people that, and they don't seem to either read the comments or do any research on their own sometimes. It's neither here nor there, you know. I don't mind directing people to it, but sometimes it feels like I'm repeating myself. Also, in case y'all didn't know, Scary Juju is a big fan of Key and Peele. This next comment is interesting because it comes from a figure who is turning into quite the legend in Scary Juju's comment sections. He's very, 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 very vocal about his displeasure with a lot of the newer content that's been coming out. And, you know, I feel I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't include one of his comments that were directed at one of my stories on here. This is from Jeremiah Johnson, and it is on the Jimmy's Hot Pie Massacre story, which, I'm going to be completely honest with y'all, I'm not a big fan of that story myself. You know, I wrote that story as kind of a tribute to a pizza place that I worked at, that I actually still work at part-time. And, well, anyways, here's the comment. It says, "I'm not sure how I feel about this one. The story feels rushed and all over the place. I feel like the main characters could have been explained a bit more, as well as the monster or demon or whatever it was supposed to be. Then they lower Lucifer into the mix in the last few minutes. I don't think this one is for me, and I'm really surprised it was chosen by Juju to narrate. I've grown fond of this channel, but this one is a big letdown. Oh well, back to searching the library of Juju for much better stories." Mr. Johnson. You know, like I said, this isn't my favorite story that I've ever done. That being said, you leave way too many comments on Juju's channel, and I'm petty as shit. So, with that also being said, I've said this to you before. Your ego is crushing your high horse again. Step off. Speaking of Mr. Johnson, here he was again on a video that is 9 months old. And, you know, if you guys have paid attention to him in the comment sections of Juju's videos, is he's going back and watching all this other content, and then it seems like almost every new story he hates, but he likes the older stories, which is hilarious. And, you know, I've had discussions about him with various people. So here's another comment he left, and this was on the part 4 of the 9th Roman Legion series. It says, "Please put these freaking stories in order. I'm so confused on what to listen to first, or second, or third, or fourth, or fifth, or however many stories that are all tied together." You know what's funny is he's one of those people that I have commented on and actually directed to the playlist because he's asked for it before. And as I said, I'm petty as shit. So when you're going to leave a comment and you're going to respond to myself in particular, and you're going to like make demands like that, again, your ego is crushing your high horse. And I would love to get more into it, but, you know, just yeah. Anyways, again, like I was saying, there's a playlist, and we're not even going to need the playlist soon enough, because Juju is doing the supercut of the Ouroboros Anthology. And I'm going to be completely honest with you, I would say the Cadenverse supercut, but I'm not a big fan of the phrase Cadenverse. Fun fact, it makes me sound like a narcissist. Like, you know, I don't need any help sounding like a narcissist. I already sound like one.
This is just an editor's note while I'm editing this video. I said that I didn't like referring to it as the Cadenverse, and I don't, but I do it like 50 other times in this video. So just bear with me, okay? Also, you know, I really hope that my comments regarding him don't get taken out of context. The only reason I commented towards him is because he harasses the hell out of Juju's channel. Like, you guys could go back and look at the at his comments. Anyways, yeah.
This next comment is from part 1 of The Realm. It says, "Did bro land an Ark survival?" No. So this next comment is also from part 1 of The Realm. I will say I actually do like this comment. Because it's a good comment for discussion. And me and this guy actually had a discussion in the comment section underneath this comment, but I actually wanted to address it on here because, like I said, it is a comment that I like. It says, "Of course they'll be using swords. Gotta say that's my only complaint. I like the story actually, but below is what I have to say. Think about it. They live in a primitive society. Do you think they have consistent sources of metal to waste on inefficient weapons like swords? They should be using spears instead. Longer reach and cheaper to make. Swords are like really expensive on metals and have trashy reach compared to what they are fighting in the wild. In their situation, it is a weapon they'll pick if they no longer want to live. Even if they are rich on metal, they would invest in something far more important than swords. Chainmails and armors using swords doesn't really fit the story." So I actually do have something to say about this. And yes, he is right. Swords do not really fit the story. That being said, I actually think in part 1 of that story, they are only using swords to fight the terror birds in the fighting pit, which is a fight that they honestly weren't supposed to win to begin with. And the only reason Mr. Haddix won was, you know, he got lucky. And yeah, I mean, that's really it. The society in particular that he's talking about are the Chicken Gods hordes, which is, they're based on the Mongols. And yeah, they have these swords on their hips, but I'm pretty sure the story also says that they have spears. And their main weapons are their bows and arrows, because again, they are based on the Mongols. Except they ride chickens. But yeah, no, I mean, that's really what I have to say about that. There's going to be more revealed as to why, you know, certain weapons are what they're using instead of firearms, because they know what guns are. That's why they took Buck's gun away from him. And like I said, in part 3, you're going to find out a lot more. I'm working on part 3 right now. I'm actually getting closer and closer to being done with it. What I'm trying to decide, though, is because part 3 is turning out to be so long, is whether I should split it up into multiple parts. Because I do want to finish the realm, because I do want to move on and get deeper and deeper into the story. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into the actual question portion of this, because that's actually what we're about to go into. So with that being said, let's stop with the petty hate mail and me making myself look super, super immature and actually get into actual questions. Okay? So we're going to get started with the questions on here. And the first batch of questions we have is from the big man himself, Scary Freaking Juju. And the first comment on here says, which movie or franchise, could be books or comics, had a big influence on the Cadenverse? And to put it quite simply, it's a mixture of things. It's a massive bucket of worms. I grew up watching a lot of action horror like Underworld, Resident Evil, Van Helsing. Big fan of anything zombie related, especially when I was a kid when I was growing up. I still am a big fan of like anything zombie related. I'm also a sucker for a good creature feature. Some of my favorites are Dog Soldiers, Aliens, Tremors, Jaws, and Deep Blue Sea. When I was a kid, 2 of my favorite movies of all times. There's those kind of movies, and they definitely played a role in shaping what the Ouroboros cycle, like a lot of the monsters and stuff that show up there. Also, I mean, let's be real. When it comes to these stories, they are kind of like a shared universe with a lot of them, and they build up to a crossover. So, I'd be lying if I didn't say the MCU, as in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, didn't play a role in inspiring what this ultimately turned into. I wanted to do something like that, but more action horror related, and I wanted to, I wanted it to be like the MCU, but super, super bloody. And I don't mean like invincible bloody. I mean like unpredictable. So, unpredictable. You don't know which characters are going to end up dying and which ones aren't, even though I'm pretty sure at the end everyone could figure it out. And yeah, no, I wanted to do a massive story, and I wanted to try and stick the landing, and I hope I did it for you guys. I really, really, really do, as far as Volume 1 goes. And I can't wait for you guys to see what we have planned for Volume 2, because it's it's not... Some of y'all are going to cry, I think. But yeah, no. And then on here, moving on to the second question, it says, what's your favorite horror movie? Also specifically sci-fi horror. And that's honestly, that's pretty easy. I have, it's not going to make sense, my answer here, but it's going to kind of make sense. As far as like favorite movies go, I always like to point to 3, especially when it goes to like horror movies and sci-fi horror. Again, this isn't going to make much sense, but my favorite horror movie is Dog Soldiers. I love the movie. I love the small scale stakes. Bullets and werewolves. It's very, very inspired by Alien, and you can tell, and it's on a smaller budget, and it works super, super well for that budget. If you've paid attention to some of the stuff we've done on this channel, I do talk about that movie a ton. But yeah, it is my favorite horror movie. My favorite sci-fi horror movie is going to be The Thing from 1982. I am a huge sucker for practical effects in horror, and that movie just nailed it. I mean, the atmosphere is tense. That movie keeps you on the edge of your seat, especially if you've never seen it before. And, I've seen that movie dozens of times, and every time I watch it, it's just like, oh, it's so good. It's definitely... It's my favorite sci-fi horror movie. It also, if you guys haven't figured it out, played a big part in the inspiration of Amanu, who is like a dark cosmic being. And especially like if you pay attention to a lot of the stuff that happens, yes, that did play a huge role in shaping that character. And then lastly, and this is where it's going to get confusing. My favorite movie of all time, period, is Jaws. Now, I know it's technically a horror movie, and like I said, it's not going to make any sense, but that has been my favorite movie since I was about 3 years old. And that is not a joke. My parents let me watch a rated R movie when I was 3 years old, and they should be ashamed of themselves. Also, the movie didn't really ever scare me. So, it's not a horror movie. I don't think it's a horror movie. I think it's a thriller, but I don't think it's a horror movie. It might make you scared to go in the water, but, it's a puppet shark. Still my favorite movie ever. Fucking love Chief Brody. Then, for the third question on here, it says, when did you start writing, and why did you start writing? That's an interesting question, Mr. Juju. Interestingly enough, I've always had a thing for writing. When I was in 3rd grade, I think it was 3rd grade, I liked to write stories about zombies, and I liked to write stories about sharks. And I like to write stories about zombie sharks. I can remember one of the stories I wrote. Again, big fan of Jaws, and keep in mind, I was 3 years old. If I could go somewhere and find these little stories, I would totally post pictures of them on here because they were hilarious. I draw little pictures of sharks. One of the stories I wrote was called Jaws versus Mecha Jaws, which is so original, I know. As far as the Cadenverse goes, though, or the Ouroboros Anthology, here's a fun fact. The characters in one of those particular story arcs were actually all originally based on a bunch of my friends from high school. And it's really interesting because, as you write and rewrite stories, everything evolves, and absolutely none of those characters, aside from one, made it through to any of the stories that Juju did. Which is super interesting because that was the first big story that I ever wrote involved all those characters, and I think there's only one, maybe two of those characters actually show up in the Ouroboros Anthology, and one of them was Chad, actually. He was based on a really good friend of mine, and I am pretty sure he's the only one that really made it through and has any real screen time. Like I said, the story evolved, and I started creating these other characters in my head, like Ken Sullivan, Marcus Octavius, Trent Grayson, and things just kind of took off from there. But yeah, no, the Ouroboros Anthology, I've been working on it since high school, and I'm 28 years old now, and it's my life's work. Wish it would sell more copies, but I can't really complain because I've gotten to share that work out there, and Juju played a massive part in that. I mean, I wouldn't be anywhere without that guy. So, I am super grateful. I am super grateful. And the next question on Juju's list of questions was, what movie monster would you like to make a cameo in the Cadenverse? That is a tough one. Honestly, because I can think of so many that I would like to see a lot of these characters come across or meet or, just do anything with. I think it would be funny, though, if there some portal opened in Godzilla walked through. I mean, I can only imagine the look on Nemesis or Marcus's face if something like that happened. Or I also think it would be funny if the Blob showed up, because Chad would probably make a P. Diddy joke somewhere in there. And but there is a movie out there and I haven't seen this movie since I was in like high school. Sometimes I don't know if this movie is actually real or not. And if it is, I do not recommend you see it. It's called One-Eyed Monster, and if you look it up, you will know why I think this movie is so funny. It's not that I think this movie is so funny, but why the context is going to be so funny. Because if Marcus watched that movie, he would have a PTSD episode about Rasputin. Just look it up. Alright, and let's get to the last one. And he put on here, this is a spicy one. You don't have to answer if you... LOL. He said, who is your least favorite character in the Cadenverse? And I'm going to be honest with you guys, that is a really tough one to answer. From a writer's standpoint, the hardest character to keep consistent was Abaddon. I wanted him to come off as imposing as hell and charismatic, but also super insecure at the same time. And sometimes I think it worked, sometimes it didn't. But that isn't really honestly what he was asking, is it? Honestly, if I had to pick the character I'd least like to sit in a room with, it would 100% be Lilith. But, you know, if I had to pick a character I wouldn't want to ever have to write again, hands down, my least favorite character in this series is Father Time. He's a character, I feel like I failed him as a writer, honestly, and, you know, when I wrote him, I was honestly going for kind of like a mad god type thing, and ended up with an unreliable plot device. But, you know, everything I write sounds like it was written by a 6th grade child, so it makes sense. Oh well. Alright, so this next batch of questions come from a user called the Fiendish Fox. I've noticed him in the comments section of a lot of Juju's videos. He comments on a lot of my stuff, a lot of my posts. He is actually probably one of my favorite fans on here, because he will make comments and actually like will make me think about stuff and will make me think about how to answer stuff. And so like I appreciate people like that, people that are willing to make comments like that and not come across as hateful, like Rude Islander. Anyways, with that being said, let's go over his comments, or let's go over his questions, because he left a batch of them. What's going on with the Keepers now? So the Keepers are currently being run by Royce. I don't know if you guys remember him, but Royce was given command of the Hellhunters after Janus was killed in part 3 of Marcus's original story. So he's running things now, especially with Father Time dead. They're not as powerful an organization without Father Time, because Father Time, you know, being a primordial being, he was a driving force behind a lot of what their abilities were. That being said, they still have a lot of tech laying around, and they're still decent at their jobs. So a lot of what they're focusing on right now is going to be, especially with, you know, Gehenna being back under Lucifer's control, is going to be Amanu, and where Amanu is popping up in the multiverse. So that takes a big portion of what they're trying to focus on. That being said, David Stone is actually their second in command now, and he's in charge of the Hellhunters now. And we'll catch up with them later, especially when it comes to, and this is going to be kind of a minor spoiler, the assassin that tried to kill the guy that was one of the executives in the Sparky Spark company in the Hitman story. That story is going to play a kind of a role going forward, especially with the Hellhunters, and this is going to be a new Hellhunters group. And that's going to be a story that we're going to do later on down the road. So David and the Hellhunters, you know, they work for the Keepers. They're investigating the Vergessen. or Vergison, however you want to pronounce it. Yeah, and moving forward in Volume 2, that's gonna be a big thing. So yeah, no, that's what the Keepers are up to, and yeah. The next question is: Abaddon's empire is in ruins with him gone, so did the Keepers take back the conquered Earths? No, they did not. And that is because most of the Earths that Abaddon conquered are going to be completely barren now. And the ones that aren't, Lucifer obviously called back the forces. Now, some of them actually came back, some of them didn't. There are going to be plenty of rogues out there, and they'll definitely play a role later on. That being said, no. At some point in the story, it is mentioned that Abaddon has conquered like over 1 million worlds, and the Keepers are never going to be able to take all that back. And Gideon forces on these Earths, what they like to do is they'd like to bring as many of the living people back to hell as they possibly can so they can torture them. And granted, whenever it comes to the multiverse, if it's not Earth Prime, you're only getting like a partial soul. So, they're torturing these people in hell, and it's fueling their energy boxes or their torture boxes. And then once those people die, their partial soul still is going to end up merging with whichever multiverse in the layout's going to be closest. You could probably hear the dogs growling back there. But, yeah, so those Earths are a lot, and some of them are going to be uninhabitable too, because there was a lot of stuff involved in some of these wars, and sometimes Abaddon would just kick back and let the humans kill themselves. He was the cause of a few nuclear wars. Let's not get it twisted. Next question. How does death work in your universe? Like, when an angel or demon dies, are they permanently dead? I am so glad you asked this question, because I've been wanting to explain it and wanting to try to find a way to explain it. And this is probably not going to be a good explanation, but I'm going to do my best here. It really depends. In a way, nothing in this multiverse is really permanently dead. But that being said, if a human dies on Earth Prime, they either go to heaven or hell. At either of those places, they are given some type of body that can only function in said realm. Kind of. And they will exist like that. That being said, like, some of these bodies that were crafted in these realms can go on like other Earths. Don't get it twisted, because there were the souls that escaped Gehenna during the Hellion Rebellion, and they were able to stay on the Earth. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but it was the Earth where they have the Keepers FOB in the multiverse is what they refer to it as. And so they're able to kind of exist on that Earth. That being said, they couldn't go to Earth Prime because they'd instantly catch on fire. And that's because they're from Gehenna. As far as like humans that go to heaven and die, that is also kind of convoluted and complicated, and it's also me trying to avoid answering that part of the question. But yeah, heaven doesn't like to let dead souls back, or let souls that have been to heaven come back. Yeah, it's like I said, it's convoluted, and I know that sounds dumb. As far as like angels and demons go, that's actually a little bit less complicated, honestly, because a lot of the demon princes and princesses, #woke, a lot of them were angels originally. So when like said fallen angels ended up dying, their essence was trapped in hell with Lilith and that was during the Lucifer's initial rebellion and whatnot. But yeah, when they died, their essence was kind of just hanging around down there. So the Lilith's flesh pits, they used them to create bodies for them, and yeah, and they use those to build those flesh pits to build like more and more demon bodies, and as evil souls died, they ended up inhabiting those demon bodies, and their forces grew. I hope that makes sense. I really do. As far as like when an angel dies and their essence doesn't go to hell in this multiverse, like say like Raziel were to get offed by someone, and the dryer is going off behind me. Say like Raziel were to get offed, or Michael, their essence would go to heaven. But like I said, heaven is not big on letting beings come back. So, it's again trying to avoid answering this question without sounding stupid. Yeah, I mean, they can be permanently dead, and I'm sure there's going to be like ways to bring them back, but they're not going to be able to grow another angelic body. I mean, just straight up, they can't. I mean, in theory, like if Michael were to die, he could send his essence down and partially possess Angelica, but he wouldn't do that. And then you have characters like what was her? I'm forgetting my own characters. The Owens. Jeziel, where did she go when she died? And that's a question that I need to answer, and I'm sure there will be a day when we get to it, and we'll find out. I can tell you she didn't go to hell, so that's like I said, that is a good question. I love this question, and like I said, especially with this guy, is he gives me a lot to think about. So that's something we're going to have to explore at some point. So yeah. Okay, next question. How did you come up with rebooting Volume 1 with Evil Trent? Can you explain your reasoning? I'm interested in your writing process. So, as you guys know, Evil Trent, Old Man Grayson, or Grayson, as he's referred to in the finale story, is the Trent Grayson that we were following for like the entirety of the Nemesis stories. That's the exact same guy, and I assume you guys know that he's not evil. Okay, he's not evil. He is what I would describe as kind of a sad, broken man who's lost everything. He's someone who, he knows he's being misled by Father Time, but he hates himself so much that he doesn't really care. And yeah, I mean, that's that character in a nutshell. Now, granted, he is able to kind of make peace with himself at the end, and right before he unfortunately kicks the bucket. But yeah, I mean, and as far as rebooting the universe, I really wanted to end the story on a note to where I could effectively introduce the next big arc and actually have it make sense. And there will be a little bit more on that particular stuff later. But yeah. I wanted to end it at a certain point because I wanted to be able to focus on the future, and I had to reboot, or kind of reboot the universe. Like I said, I don't want to get too spoilery in this video, but you guys will see what I mean eventually. Next question. What is Heaven and Gehenna's relations like? I can tell you right now, it is better now than it was before, especially since Lucifer's running things. Both Heaven and Gehenna now answer to, I call them the Grand Office of the Primordials, which is something we are going to learn about a lot more in the coming stories. Later in the coming stories, but we're going to learn a lot more about them. The next question is Heaven now keeping a constant eye on Gehenna to ensure they don't try to conquer Earth Prime and its parallels? They are, but they don't really need to. Like I said, Lucifer is a character, and nobody trusts him, and they shouldn't. I'm going to admit this right now. I didn't mean to make that character so likable. It just kind of happened. And he ended up being a lot of fun to write, but he's not a good guy. And I'm going to let y'all know that right now. He is not a good guy. He's not completely evil, but he's not a good guy. He's also not a conqueror anymore. So there is that. Like I said, again, he's not a good guy, but he's not a conqueror. He's not Abaddon. He's not like Abaddon. He used to be, but not so much anymore. What he is now really is more kind of an agent of chaos. He does stuff because it amuses him, and nothing more, nothing less. So, next question. How long did Victor disappear for when he was on Earth while he was trying to infiltrate Gideon? He couldn't have become CEO overnight. That is an interesting question because let's get into Victor for a second. Victor Marx, or the angel whose name is too long to pronounce in any known language, was an angelic general who threw a hissy fit after his daughter was killed by humans, and his daughter was half human. She was a Nephilim lightbender, super powerful. Was one of was Marcus's first lover. It's interesting because he's kind of a hypocrite too, because he's mad at the humans because they killed his daughter, but at the same time he could have gone and seen his daughter anytime in heaven because she was in heaven. So, it wasn't that they killed his daughter, but it was that they killed his daughter. It wasn't that his daughter was dead, it was that they killed his daughter. Like, how dare they? That was his thought process, and he didn't like that he didn't like that humans were super emotional and super like, what's a good way to put this? He doesn't like that humans can think for themselves. That's kind of putting it broadly, I guess, but it plays a big part in why he did what he did, and that's kind of his whole thing, is he thinks humans are super emotional. They're too controlled by their emotions. But everything he did because he was angry. So he ended up being more human than everyone else, and Abaddon definitely took advantage of that, and so did Lilith, because that's what they do. So yeah, there's that as far as Victor goes as a character. He didn't really infiltrate Gideon. He didn't need to, because he helped found it. Him and Abaddon, they were posing as humans, and they founded a company that would become Gideon. It's as simple as that. Look at Tepe's Mining with this storyline. Tepe's Mining was founded in the 1800s, and they grew, and they became they grew, and they branched off into like Tep Club, and they created Tepes whiskey, and they had a brewery, and all this other stuff. Gideon, it was a super small company that Victor and Adrian Stein created, and Victor they blew up after Victor created the Easy Pill, which, you know, is something that's not really mentioned that much in the later stories, but in the first Nemesis story, especially if you go look into the webtoon, which, golly, I wish I could finish that, but I'm broke, plays a massive role in the story. So yeah, no, he helped found the company. He didn't infiltrate it. The next question: what was Heaven's reaction when they found out one of their highest-ranking generals tried to exterminate humanity on Earth Prime? Let alone said general would later become a demon general. Surely it wouldn't have been pretty. Yeah, you're right. Heaven was very, very not happy, and as soon as they realized that Victor was up to something, mainly because Gideon and the Easy Peel and you know, they kept an eye on him. Him and Abel, they sent Abel to talk to him, and him and Abel talked a few times. And you know, I say a few times. There's one conversation they have in particular, and it's right when Heaven has deduced that Victor is trying to create a weapon, or in that weapon being Lazarus, and they send Abel to talk to Victor, and that scene is actually like the prologue for the webtoon. So if you want to go look at that, that was kind of when Heaven found out that Victor was actually like up to something. Now they knew that he had kind of gone rogue and was running around. But you know, they weren't 100% sure that he was up to something yet. I mean, you know, they should have been, and that was one of their a big misstep by them, honestly. And that kind of goes with another kind of issue I have with my own writing is the bad guys are so far ahead of the good guys in most of these stories that I could have done it a little better. And you know, we'll see what happens going forward. The next question is, will Lilith return in Volume 2? She's been a major antagonist who has beef with half the cast. There's no way putting her in a torture box would keep her down. And yeah, no, Lilith is coming back. I mean, she almost has to, right? She is arguably the most effective villain. I mean, there's no arguably about it. She is the most effective villain in this entire series. And she's definitely the most liked villain in this entire series, somehow. And I would be doing you guys a disservice if, you know, I had kept her alive in Volume 1 and didn't bring her back in some way, shape, or form for the next volume. So, yeah, no, she's definitely coming back. I know exactly what I'm going to do with her. So stand by. You guys will see that. There are a few different fights that I want to see her have that I've been waiting to unleash upon you guys, and yeah, no, she'll be there. You just wait. The next question is from Madison Lukenbach. It says, how are you planning to go from here? I'm assuming the Ouroboros cycle is pretty much wrapped up and the Realm is your new project, but will the tie-ins to the Ouroboros cycle turn into a bigger plot lines? I'm asking, will the Realm story stay mostly separate with a few tied-in plot threads, or will both stories link back up? Realm... So, yeah, no, the Realm is Cadenverse Volume 2. I wanted to bring some new characters to the forefront before sprinkling the old ones back in. We're going to get a lot of very familiar faces very, very soon, especially in the Realm Part 3. We're going to get one in particular, and we're going to get a few more mentioned. And, yeah, like I said, the Realm is going to be Cadenverse Volume 2. That's probably what the book is going to end up being called, is the Realm Anthology. And I'm gearing up to do another story following the Realm, and we're going to see a lot of familiar faces in that one. So, you know, keep an eye out for that story. That particular story is going to be from the POV of a character that we have already met. It's going to be this is a spoiler, but I figured I would reveal it now since we're getting a little bit closer to the end of the Q&A portion of this. The POV is going to be from Derek Grayson, who is the son of Trent Grayson and Ophelia Wilde. Next question is from Et Nova Lux. Are there any other authors recently you'd be interested in collaborating with? The Mr. Mills 45, Majin Zeldry, Black Volumes, Dominic Eagle. I think a collab could be cool at some point in the future. There are a lot of authors that write for Juju that are very, very talented. There are... I've talked with one in particular. He's the only other author that writes for Juju that I've interacted with. And he's very, very talented. Now, we didn't talk about a collab or anything. We talked about other stuff that I'm not gonna reveal on here. And he knows who he is. He's a good dude, and I enjoy his work. That being said, as far as other authors that write for Juju goes, I would love to do some type of live stream with all of them on, and maybe have Juju on at some point, and kind of do a live Q&A for everyone's stories and just kind of bullshit about stuff. But there has to be interested for a project like that, and the stars would honestly have to align for something like that to work out. But yeah, no, if the interest is there for any type of collaboration, I would be down. But we all have our own projects that we have to work on too. So yeah. This next question is from Jackie Ball. It's not really a question. It's more of a statement. I would definitely wanted to include one of his comments on here because he's someone who's been commenting on these videos since the beginning, the very, very first one. I've seen his name on there. He said, "At the Predator, add some Hindu gods and goddesses. Stapleton was a good guy, or a good bad guy. Glad he's dead. Bring back Megan and Merlin somehow." Do you mean the ultimate Predator from the story I did with the serial killer, or are you talking about the alien from the Schwarzenegger movie, or are you talking about P. Diddy, because they're all predators? I'm kidding. As far as Hindu deities go, we may see some in the future. I mean, we do have Kali on the Atlantean Council still. I mean, she's still alive for now. Earth Prime does actually look completely different, and we'll get into more of that whenever we finally get to the Derek Grayson story that we're going to do. And then as far as bringing characters back from the dead, you're talking about Megan and Merlin, and unfortunately, not every character gets a happy ending. And yeah, it sucks that those characters are gone, and there is a chance that we could see one of those characters in some capacity, but it won't be through some type of resurrection or anything like that. It would be through a flashback. So yeah, like I said, you could see some of these characters again, because I write stuff out of order because I'm dumb. But yeah, no, not everyone gets a happy ending. Sorry. Hey look, the Fiendish Fox has more questions. First question: when did the ISDF go public? Well, I don't know about the ISDF, but the ISDD went public shortly after the battle in Norway, where Loki unleashed a horde of giants upon the land. Yeah, that's when the world really started to kind of take notice of a lot of the supernatural elements going on. I mean, you can't really cover up an entire city getting absolutely messed up by giants, and then a massive aerial battle with alien-type spaceships that are... Yeah, so that's when they went public. That could have been explained a little bit better. And once we get to the actual comic portion of things, if we ever, hashtag I'm broke, that will be explained a whole lot more. And then the next question, do aliens exist in the Cadenverse? Aliens do exist in the Cadenverse. I mean, we've met some already. Where do you think all the pagan gods came from? The Atlanteans, the Greek gods, the Olympians, the Norse deities, these guardians, the Hindu gods. I don't know their pantheon name. Is that racist? I don't know. Anyways, yeah, I mean those are technically aliens because their ancestors did crash on Earth and they were from another planet. And there are more alien species out there that we haven't met yet. That'll be something we get into at some point, but yeah, no, they're out there. They're out there. We're not alone. Yeah, this guy said, "Nice try, buddy. I wrote this. You internet guys are something else." This is on one of my stories. I 100% wrote the story, and I actually did respond to this guy. I don't usually. I put this in here because it made me laugh. I thought it was funny. Look, Mr. Strategy Galactic, I'm not mad at you for this, but I am. And that's all we have for today. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this Q&A video that we managed to string together at 4:48 in the morning on a Tuesday. It's also a work day, but I work nights, so I don't really care. Yeah, no. And, remember, leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And, yeah, we'll see y'all next time. You know what? I gotta know for sure. Is this movie even real? Here, give me 1 second. Let me... No, it's definitely real. I see the Wikipedia thing there. Yep, no, it was not a fever dream. This movie's got a 28% on Rotten Tomatoes. Oh boy, that can't be good. Let's see who's in this thing. I don't recognize any of them. Here, let me click on here. No, I have no idea. I may have seen that guy. I doubt it. Huh. There's a reason why I'm looking this up. It's because there's I do remember one person who's in this movie, but he wasn't on that list right there. Let's see here. Yeah, oh yeah, there he is. Is that fucking Ron Jeremy?